With the latest agriculture news from across the state and nation, it's time for the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. Here's your host, Sabrina Halvorson.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us this morning on the AgNet News Hour. Coming up later, why addressing fruit fly outbreaks was an all-hands-on-deck situation. But our top story today, nothing short of exceptional. That's how Farmers National Company describes the agricultural land market over the last 5 years. According to the company, gains in value are prevalent across all classes of land in every region of the country. Strong commodity markets, moderate interest rates, buyer demand, and an overall healthy agricultural economy has also supported the growth of land values during this time. Jay Van Gordon is the Farmers National Company area sales manager for the Eastern region, including Indiana, Michigan, Ohio, and Kentucky. He says that trend continues.
Well, right now we're sitting at what you would still call all-time record highs for U.S. farmland. We've seen a real rapid rise here in about the last 3+ years, starting to level off at this point now due to several factors. But yeah, really at all-time high numbers. If
you're considering selling, he says things look good now and for the next few months.
Well, I think if you're on the potential selling side of farmland, the message would be we're still at pretty much all-time record highs. If you're looking to sell now, would still be a good time to do it in the upcoming 6 months or so. Typically, prime selling season tends to be late summer, early fall through the end of the calendar year, as that's when crops are coming off, leases are terminating, and the buyer can most quickly gain control of the land from that standpoint.
It's a different story for potential buyers.
On the buying side, there's everybody, I think, at this point in time know where interest rates have gone here the last 3 years. So interest rates are definitely a negative factor for buyers on the buying side, as well as for farm operators, declining grain markets down to about a 3-4 year low in the last few weeks, along with inflation factors. Make the buying part a little tougher. You're probably going to want to have at least part of that purchase, a fairly decent part of that purchase in cash, to really look at buying a property right now.
However, he does point out that while things may be more difficult for buyers right now, much of the land for sale is of high value.
Right now, we're seeing fairly level, slight pricing for really high quality, high percentage tillable land, less productive farms that are lower tillable, say 60-70% tillable, or lower quality soils. Poorly drained farms are probably off 5 to 10% in the last 12 months.
We'll have more on ag land values in today's interview segment. Farmers and landowners can use edge-of-field conservation practices to improve water quality for themselves and the nation. Todd Gleason has more on these simple-to-deploy conservation methods.
Edge-of-field conservation practices are not rocket science, but they are highly effective at improving water quality. These can be as simple as a grass waterway or buffer strip next to a small creek, or much more intensive like a bioreactor at the end of a tile line or a constructed wetland. The goal of these edge-of-field practices is to remove nitrates, says Extension Water Quality Program Manager at Iowa State University, Catherine DeLong.
And so it's something we really want to take seriously. And these practices, like bioreactors, saturated buffers, constructive wetlands, they can, on average, remove nitrate up to 50%. And so that's a big impact. But these practices also have other benefits. So a saturated buffer has a buffer. And these buffers, these areas of perennial vegetation have lots of benefits for wildlife, for catching soil before it goes into a common water body. And a lot of times these areas that are on the edges of our fields can be unprofitable. They're compacted. We might be paying more money to get good yield from these areas than we are from actually selling that crop. And so this can be an ideal opportunity to put in an edge-of-field practice.
Still, those edge-of-field practices can be expensive to build. DeLong says landowners, farmers, or absentee have options that will help pay for them.
Yeah, absolutely. We are in a time right now where it just seems like there is a lot of money for conservation. A lot of it is coming through the USDA NRCS, so there's lots of opportunities to get cost share to support these practices. If for some reason you may not want to take all your money from the federal government, there are usually other options if you want to try something else.
The first place to start when considering edge of field practices on your farm is at the local NRCS office or online at nrcs.usda.gov. I'm University of Illinois Extension's Todd Gleason.
You're listening to the AgNet News Hour. In today's National Spotlight, U.S. farm products are facing continued stiff competition on world markets. Gary Crawford has more.
U.S. agricultural exports continue to slow. Ag imports continue to grow. USDA economist James Kaufman says we now have complete trade numbers for the first 8 months of this fiscal year, October through May. And here's what the numbers say.
Agricultural exports in May were at $13.7 billion, down almost 2% from the previous May. This puts U.S. exports for fiscal year 2024 at $122.4 billion, 5% or $6 billion lower than the same period in fiscal 2023.
The biggest export value declines coming in bulk products. Kaufman says bulk product sales overall are down 18% from this time a year ago. We have wheat exports down 18%, corn 7%, cotton down by 11%.
The main problem is soybean exports, and especially soybean exports to China.
Kaufman says in terms of metric tons of U.S. beans going to China during the first 8 months of this fiscal year.
This year, the U.S. exported 23.4 million metric tons as opposed to 30.5 million metric tons the previous year. This is a 23% decrease in soybean export volumes to China.
Kaufman says China's still importing lots of soybeans, just not from us, mostly from Brazil, which has a big supply and competitive prices. So in terms of export volume, total U.S. soybean exports to the world for this season are down 19%. In terms, though, of soybean export value, it's even worse. We're down 29% from this time a year ago. However, it's not all bad news on exports.
High-value product exports have fared a bit better than bulk commodities and are up 4% in fiscal year 2024.
With some pretty large increases for several high-value products, including fresh fruit up 22%, ethanol 23%, tree nut exports running 25% ahead of a year ago. Meanwhile, though, we're importing more ag products, 4% more than this time a year ago. Gary Crawford reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
That's today's National Spotlight. Now here's the livestock report. A woman from Mitchell, South Dakota is one of the partners in a first-of-its-kind auction platform for beef sales. It went live June 1st. Amanda Radke says bidonbeef.com is another way consumers can purchase meat directly from the people who raised the cattle.
Our goal is to create opportunities for producers to earn a premium, to move volume, to connect with consumers or restaurants and people that genuinely want a consistently high-quality source of beef that's all USA, that's made in this country, born, raised, fed, processed, and delivered by American ranching families. And then on the flip side, we're spending a lot of time connecting with consumers. And so we want to get into urban America and tell our story and hopefully help people stockpile their freezers with beef that they can trust and feel really great about.
Radke says producers get vetted before being allowed to sell their beef through the website.
With a third-party, certification, producers that we feel provide a really high-quality, well-marbled, flavorful Angus and Wagyu beef eating experience for that restaurant-style dining that people can enjoy right at home. And so we're working with different ranchers, and we're having weekly auctions, and our goal is to connect with as many urban consumers as we can by telling the stories of these families and really bridging the gap and kind of addressing misconceptions in agriculture and all those things.
While it may seem fairly common for people in rural areas, Radke says the auction and live auction processes are new experiences for many people.
It's really a fun and fast-paced and competitive way to buy what we think is the best beef in the country. We also do live auctions. So the auction we did in New York, there were people in the stands. We had a world-class auctioneer, Wes Tiemann, who was on the block taking bids. And what's been really fun is seeing the excitement of people buying beef. They're giving each other high fives and knuckle pounds, and there's random like applause during the auctions when somebody really gets what they were wanting. And so it's really fun and rewarding to bring cowboy culture to an urban setting and show people, this is how we've always done business in the cattle business. And we want to bring that concept to you, where your word is your bond, and we can make a handshake deal. And you pick the price, and we'll take care of the quality. And I can't think of a better example of capitalism in the free market than exactly that.
She says once the auction winner is determined, the beef will be sent directly to the winner.
It's super fun when you win. There's confetti that goes on the website and says, congratulations, you won this steak. And then pretty soon you'll get a notification of when the beef has shipped. And yeah, within a couple days, that beef is right at your doorstep, ready to go and to be enjoyed by your family.
If people have questions about what the different cuts of beef are, what cuts would work best for a particular recipe, how to cook the beef, or how their auction process works, Radke encourages people to contact them.
At Bid on Beef, I really want to be a resource for people to give them confidence buying beef. I know not everybody knows how to cook a roast, or maybe they've never heard of a tomahawk steak, or they're intimidated about the buying process because, a chicken breast is a chicken breast, and you throw different sauces on it and it's hard to mess up. But beef, there's nuances to it. And so, yeah, we want to work with people through my social media channels. I'll be doing a lot of recipes, tutorials, answering questions. And so we want to give people confidence in choosing beef, and we'll be with them every step of the way as they make their purchasing decision.
Radke says the goal is to empower consumers.
They are totally in the driver's seat. They can pick the ranch, they can pick the beef cuts, they can pick how many pounds, and nowhere else in America do you get to pick the price too. And so a savvy shopper could really watch these auction sales. They could get some deals. We're not putting a floor on the beef. This is just a humble way for producers to say, here's what we have. We're really proud of it. You tell us what it's worth. And so that's our goal really, is to build those valuable relationships through these interactions and these auctions.
For shoppers, it's free to join bidonbeef.com. Don't forget, if you've missed any of our morning shows, or if you simply need to catch the news at a different time, you can subscribe to our podcast and have statewide agriculture news at your convenience. All you have to do is search for the AgNet News Hour on your favorite podcast downloading app. We will be back in just a moment with more agriculture news. Coming up in a few moments, we'll have today's This Land of Ours report, but first, more of the day's agriculture news. And with a preview of what you'll hear today on AgNet West, here's Brian German.
There have been increasing reports of significant numbers of citricola scale in the San Joaquin Valley. UC Cooperative Extension Citrus Farm Advisor Sandeepa Gautam described what growers are experiencing with increasing infestations in the 2024 season.
This is a soft-scale insect that has one generation per year, and it likes the cold and wet spring and mild summer days early in May, June. What that does is it allows for females to survive better and produce more eggs. So that's what we've been seeing this year, also in 2023. So population has been quietly building up, and this year we saw more. Right now, our growers would see a lot of first instar nymph if they sample the leaves, and eggs are still hatching, so crawlers will continue to emerge through July. So the best time to treat would be by the end of July, early August.
Syngenta Biologicals and Intrinsic Bio have teamed up to introduce a new biological solution to farmers worldwide. The partnership will reportedly provide farmers with Intrinsic Bio's special endophyte formulations. Endophytes are tiny microorganisms that live in plants and help convert atmospheric nitrogen into a form that plants can use, enhancing the uptake of vital nutrients like phosphorus. This can reduce the need for synthetic fertilizers, offering more sustainable farming practices. The formulations will be available as seed treatments and foliar applications for major crops. In a press release, Intrinsic Bio states that their proven endophytes will improve nutrient efficiency and crop yields globally. Syngenta also notes that the collaboration aligns with their goal of advancing sustainable agriculture through innovative solutions, continuing their commitment to achieving higher agricultural yields with less environmental impact. The U.S. Department of Agriculture is seeking nominations for its Fruit and Vegetable Industry Advisory Committee. USDA is looking to fill up to 25 vacancies starting in 2024. This committee, established to provide recommendations on issues affecting the U.S. produce industry, advises the Secretary of Agriculture on how USDA programs can better meet industry needs. It's comprised of representatives from various sectors like growers, wholesalers, processors, and retailers. Members serve 2-year terms with a maximum of 3 terms. Current members' terms end on October 28th, and the newly appointed members will serve from 2024 to 2026. While electronic submissions are preferred, nominations can be sent via email or standard mail. Nominations are due by September 3rd and must include a resume, a background form, and a cover letter. Invasive fruit flies have been a consistent concern for California after a particularly challenging year in 2023. California Agriculture Secretary Karen Ross said cooperation was critical for keeping outbreaks from getting out of control.
There was no time to sit back and go, oh, how did this happen? It was all hands on deck. County, state, federal government working very, very closely together. It has to be a seamless operation. We brought in Conservation Corps to help us with fruit stripping, which was one of the methodologies for us of getting those crops off those trees so that we could disrupt the life cycle of the pest, doing the treatment, but engaging with the public and making sure that we had outreach in all the languages we needed, that people knew what was going on, local government knew what was going on. So huge kudos to them. And then both the federal and state government made investments in the current fiscal year to make sure we could keep the programs going.
The California Farm Labor Contractor Association has released a preliminary schedule for the 2024 Ag Labor Forum in November. The 14th Annual Ag Labor Forum is returning to the Central Coast to provide resources and updated information to help employers, managers, HR, and other key team members understand the regulatory requirements and challenges facing the ag industry. The event is scheduled for November 21st and 22nd at the Embassy Suites, San Luis Obispo. The forum includes sessions in both English and Spanish, providing an opportunity to learn from industry experts about issues like Cal-OSHA safety and citations, mental health in agriculture, employee discipline and termination, and indoor heat standard compliance. More information about the 14th Annual Ag Labor Forum is available at calflca.org. I'm Brian German for AgNet West Radio Network.
A record-breaking investment in getting farm-fresh products to schools. That's coming up on This Land of Ours. The USDA is awarding a record-breaking $14.3 million in farm-to-school grants to help nearly 2 million children eat healthier while at school. The money will go to more than 150 projects in 43 states, the District of Columbia, Guam, and Puerto Rico. Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack says the grants not only provide food to school kids, but also support farmers and producers in their local and regional communities. He calls it a huge win for children, schools, farmers, producers, and communities. Vilsack says, quote, when schools have access to fresh, local food options with homegrown flavor, they can serve delicious, healthy dishes that kids are excited to eat while also supporting their local economy, end quote. The grants continue USDA's work to address both food and nutrition insecurity and ensure that not only are U.S. kids getting fed, but they're getting fed well. You're listening to the AgNet News Hour. The latest efforts by the Agriculture Department and other stakeholders in efforts to reduce our domestic food loss and waste by half by the year 2030 was recently announced. The federal strategy includes increased recycling of organic materials. Rod Bain looks at some of the components within this strategy in this edition of Agriculture USA.
It's an effort within our nation going on almost a decade now.
In 2015, USDA and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency set a national goal to cut food loss and waste in half by 2030.
Gene Busby has been involved in these efforts for several years now as USDA's food loss and waste liaison. That includes a recently announced national strategy to expedite food loss and waste reduction efforts, as well as increase recycling of organic materials. I'm Rod Bain. Coming up, a look at components of this new strategic framework and how it relates to existing food loss and waste reduction efforts in this edition of Agriculture USA. What are the pillars of a new national strategy focused on reducing food loss and waste and recycling organics in our country?
To prevent food loss, prevent food waste, increase the recycling rate for all organic waste, to support policies that incentivize and encourage the prevention of food loss and waste and organics recycling.
That's Jean Busby. She is USDA's Food Loss and Waste Liaison within the Office of the Chief Economist. She says the recently announced national strategy is a joint effort created by the White House, the Agriculture Department, Environmental Protection Agency, and Food and Drug Administration.
It's been in the cooker for a while.
With the draft strategy first released in December 2022, followed by a period of public comment that included over 10,000 responses.
These actions outlined in the national strategy really identify concrete steps and complementary USDA, EPA, and FDA actions that are really going to accelerate the prevention of food loss and waste where possible and the recycling of organic waste.
That acceleration's importance, according to Busby, is noted in the federal government's goal to reduce domestic food loss and waste by the year 2030.
1/3 of all food produced for human consumption never gets eaten by people. In fact, food is the single most common material found in landfills, and 61% of methane generated by decomposing landfill food waste is not captured by landfill gas collection systems and is released into the atmosphere.
Some examples of actions that can be taken through the strategy by USDA and stakeholders include the following.
To optimize the harvest or collection of raw commodities and food, such as to get excess wholesome food to those in need, such as through the emergency food assistance programs, farm to food bank projects, to really educate and engage children and youth about food waste and ways to reduce it. The collection and processing of food loss and waste and other organic materials, such as yard and tree trimmings, that would otherwise be landfilled or incinerated, and turning them into new products, such as soil amendments from composting food scraps and soaps and bone meal from rendering, will provide subject matter expertise and technical assistance to help federal agency, tribes, territories, states, and local governments as requested on policy approaches and options to reduce food loss and waste.
The various aspects of this national food loss and waste reduction and organic recycling strategy build upon existing collaborative efforts started almost a decade ago. One example, funding of urban composting and food waste reduction pilot projects for the past 5 years through USDA's Office of Urban Agriculture and Innovative Production.
The CFWR Cooperative Agreement Program this year will be jointly administering the program between the Office of Urban Agriculture and Innovative Production, as well as USDA's National Institute of Food and Agriculture. OUAIP will accept applications on grants.gov until September 4th. The projects must be 2 years in duration with an estimated start date of June 1st, 2025.
Urban Agriculture and Innovative Production Director Brian Gussie notes the diversity of collaboration within these cooperative agreements.
These agreements are led by local governments and other eligible entities,
such as schools and tribal governments. The area of focus within these proposed pilot projects include
create compost, increase access to compost for agricultural producers, reduce reliance on and limit the use of fertilizer, improve soil quality, encourage waste management and permaculture business development, increase rainwater absorption, reduce municipal food waste, and divert food waste from landfills.
More details about USDA and federal government food loss and waste reduction efforts can be found online at www.usda.gov/food loss and waste, all one word. This has been Agriculture USA. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
Our phones connect us with the rest of the world, but they can also be a doorway to trouble. Gary Crawford has more.
Before mass telemarketing technology and before computers and cell phones, you could meet a person and possibly get some clues that maybe he or she was a scam artist, like the one that classic comedian Jack Benny would encounter at the racetrack, or in this case, at a restaurant at the racetrack.
And I'll seat you at number 1. Table number 1, thank you. Hey, Bud. Huh? You gonna eat here? Yeah. What table? Table 1. Take number 9. Why, what's wrong with table 1? Bad position. It's on the rail. Now look at the breeding on table number 9. The breeding? It's by Bird's Eye Maple out of Grand Rapids.
Definitely a scammer played for laughs there. But when you are scammed for real, it is not a laughing matter. And many times it starts simply with, hopefully, you have caller ID. And if so,
don't answer calls from unfamiliar numbers.
No, that's Kansas State University Extension educator Barbara Stockbrand. She says 65% of the complaints to the Federal Trade Commission concern telemarketing calls, and most all of the telemarketing centers are not even in this country.
So they are out of the jurisdiction of our government.
So Barbara says it's up to us to protect ourselves. And she says these call centers have technology to generate what are called spoof calls.
They're rerouted so that they look like a local number. Scammers know that if it looks like a local number, their targets are more likely to answer those.
I've gotten actually marketing calls supposedly from my own phone number. That was weird. So best thing to do, don't answer. If you do answer, sometimes they will very nicely offer to take your phone number out of the list for future calls. That sounds quite neighborly, but
don't even consider this option. By taking the steps to opt out, you're confirming that there's someone on the other side of that phone that they have called, and that is something they're hoping for, so that they can actually use that number to call your number again in the future, or maybe even sell your number to other telemarketers.
And Barbara says we call them telemarketers, but in most cases they aren't marketing any legitimate product. They're trying one way or another to get money out of us, and there are a million ways to do it.
Someone calling from Social Security needing your personal information or confirming that. Or the IRS with threats of arrest, possibly if outstanding taxes aren't paid. A friend or a grandchild is in trouble and in need of money immediately. Vehicle warranties that are about to expire. Possibly an investment scam where money can be made quickly and easily by investing.
So she says whatever the scam, it's designed to get either our money or our personal information. And indeed, those folks know how to do it.
Scammers are masters of persuasion. They say whatever they can to gain your trust. They keep the pressure on, and they refuse to take no for an answer.
So best thing, don't answer the call. Next best thing, hang up. Next time, we'll delve a little more into some of the sneakier scams out there. This is Gary Crawford reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
This is the AgNet News Hour. We will be back in just a moment with more agriculture news. Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. Ag land values are leveling off, but it's still a good time for those on the selling end of the transaction. And there's also some good news for buyers. To get more information, we're joined by Jay Van Gordon, Farmers National Company Area Sales Manager. So we wanted to talk about land values, and for the last few years, we have seen things kind of all over the place. But where are we at right now?
Well, right now we're sitting at what you would still call all-time record highs for U.S. farmland. We've seen a real rapid rise here in about the last 3+ years, starting to level off at this point now due to several factors. But yeah, really at all-time high numbers.
What were some of the factors that have led to the increases over the last few years?
Well, we had, I guess I go back to about 2015 real quick, but from time period about 2015 to 2020, we had just really stagnant net farm income. Grain prices were down. There wasn't a lot of high profitability in agriculture, and land values stayed very stagnant over that time period. After we came through COVID and saw early part of 2020, saw some big drops in grain prices like a lot of the economy. Couple things happened. We had, first off, a big shift as we moved into 2021 in grain supplies. Grain prices started to move up rapidly and continued a big ascent that went on through 2021 and peaked out in 2022. At the same time, one factor kind of on the political side of things, we had a U.S. presidential election in 2020, and there had not been a lot of land being sold in that 2015 to 20 time period because pricing was very stagnant. But then the eventual winning administration, our present administration, talked a lot about a couple factors that would negatively impact U.S. farmland owners and farmers. One was the elimination of stepped up depreciation, and the other was the elimination of 1031 tax deferred exchanges for real estate. So that, along with increased grain prices, brought a lot more money into farmers' pockets, and those folks who had been holding on to sell decided it was time to sell because of some of those political factors also, and the increasing land values. So it was a a little bit of a perfect storm almost of factors coming together that kind of really drove this 2 to 3 year rapid increase in land values we saw.
So, with the increase in land values, are people still buying a lot, or is there a lot of interest?
There's still a lot of interest. Farmer operators still do have some money in their pockets, so we're still seeing them purchase a lot of farmland. Typically, somewhere between 70 to 80% of farmland purchases on a yearly basis are by operating farmers, farm families, and that type of thing. And then investors, both private investors and some larger investment groups, are also buyers of farmland. What we've seen over about the last year is probably about a 20 to 25% decrease in land sales across our territory and a lot of the U.S. farmland region, the Corn Belt, Eastern Western Corn Belt. Some of that has to do with just a very large volume of land that was sold in that 21 through 23 time period. The other part of it is some decreasing profitability from lower grain prices in the farming sector. So those two combined have, kind of led to a little bit less land on the market, but land values are still holding strong at this point. So,
For our listeners, what would be an important takeaway message, whether they are considering increasing their current farmland or maybe they are looking to get out of farming and are selling? What would be an important message for them to hear?
well, I think if you're on the potential selling side of farmland, the message would be we're still at pretty much all-time record highs. If you're looking to sell now, would still be a good time to do it in the upcoming 6 months or so. Typically, prime selling season tends to be late summer, early fall through the end of the calendar year, as that's when crops are coming off, leases are terminating, and the buyer can most quickly gain control of the land from that standpoint. On the buying side, there's everybody, I think, at this point in time know where interest rates have gone here the last couple 3 years. So interest rates are definitely a negative factor for buyers on the buying side, as well as for farm operators, declining grain markets down to about a 3-4 year here low in the last few weeks, along with inflation factors. Make the buying part a little tougher. You're probably going to want to have at least part of that purchase, a fairly decent part of that purchase in cash, to really look at buying a property right now.
All right. And is there anything else that I should have asked you and I didn't, or something that we should have talked about and didn't?
No, I think you hit most of the key topics that are really driving things from that standpoint. I mean, what we're seeing right now is, I guess the only thing we didn't really discuss, we get asked a lot is or where are prices now and where do you see them being? And that simple answer is, right now we're seeing fairly level, slight pricing for really high quality, high percentage tillable land, less productive farms that are, lower tillable, say 60-70% tillable, or lower quality soils, poorly drained farms are probably off 5 to 10% in the last 12 months.
You are listening to the AgNet News Hour. Now for more news. To advance both genetic traits and commercial uses for industrial hemp, collaborative research is needed to develop new varieties and find favorable factors. Rod Bain reports.
The potential of industrial hemp as a multi-product crop is vast, if you ask Zach Stansel of USDA's Agricultural Research Service. Yet this geneticist acknowledges
there's still a lot of challenges that we have to overcome.
After all, industrial hemp was categorized as a controlled substance for nearly 50 years, until legalization of industrial hemp for agricultural purposes occurred through the 2018 Farm Bill. And in particular, from the research aspect of industrial hemp, there is much catching up to do.
Hemp research is decades behind where it could be. And that, to me, implies we need to come together as a community and to crack open a lot of these questions and challenges with hemp as a team, as a community.
Questions such as best hemp cultivars to breed for desirable traits, such as drought resistance, and how pollination efficiency can be improved. In the latter case, hemp is pollinated not by insects, but by wind.
One thing that's been incredibly challenging to us is how do we exclude pollen during a routine seed regeneration? Our current approach is to use specialized growth chambers where we can have confidence that we're filtering out any unwanted pollen from the air. We're also developing this technology called the hemp hut that allows us to exclude pollen in a field condition.
Stansel's observation of hemp research involving a collaborative approach is actually coming to fruition through developing projects and relationships. Stansel's facility in New York State works with other ARS labs across the country.
Some of our closest collaborators are NCAUR in Peoria, Illinois, helping us evaluate thousands of individual plants for cannabinoids and terpenes and other molecules. We're also working with in New Orleans, an ARS lab that specializes in fiber quality. They've worked a lot with cotton in the past, but they're retooling their pipeline to work with hemp right now.
Stansel's ARS lab is also working with researchers at nearby Cornell University and other land-grant university labs to replicate work to better understand genetic diversity in hemp.
We have very close collaborators at Washington State University, Oregon State University, UC Davis, Alabama A&M, Louisiana State University, University of Wisconsin-Madison. All of these groups are pushing really hard, and we're exchanging lots of seeds and other types of genetic materials to accomplish this work.
I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
The U.S. is importing more food and farm products. Gary Crawford has more.
The U.S. Department of Agriculture's latest Ag Trade Update covers the first 8 months of this fiscal year, October through May. The update shows that for that time frame, we have exported $122.4 billion worth of ag products to other countries. That's 5% less than for the same time frame 1 year ago. And at the same time, we're buying 4% more agricultural products from other nations, creating what is now about a $14 billion agricultural trade deficit with the rest of the world.
Import growth has been spurred by a relatively strong U.S. economy and a strong dollar, which makes imports less expensive.
USDA economist James Kaufman says these days more Americans have the money to spend on imported foods and agricultural products, and the strong dollar means we get more for every dollar we spend. So what are we spending it on?
The livestock and meat sector has been a particularly large source of import value growth. A tight domestic market and relatively inexpensive imports from Australia and South America have spurred 20% growth in beef and veal imports so far this year over fiscal year 2023.
So far this fiscal year, we've imported almost $9.5 billion worth of beef. Kaufman says we're also buying more live animals, 32% more than this time a year ago. We're spending 10% more on imported pork products. And then, of course, taking us beyond the meat counter,
fresh fruit imports have also been a primary driver of import growth, growing 11% over fiscal year 2023 to $15 billion so far in 2024.
Americans are buying more imported wines, 8% more, and imported cheeses, 15% more. And we are spending 16% more money on imported vegetable products. In Washington, Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
That's today's top agriculture news. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. Thank you for sharing your morning with us.
To get more information on the topics you heard today, visit AgNet West online at agnetwest.com. You can also stay connected by following us on our social media at AgNet West on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also find our broadcast team of Brian German and Sabrina Halvorson on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you for listening to the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. AgNet West Radio Network, your primary choice for agriculture news.